It's my pleasure. I've been wanting Diane to come address us even for months before this, and her book is about to come out. It's called We're Here to Help. And in fact, you can see the fingers crossed behind the back as they say that. And she's going to explain exactly why. We're basically both activists in the same area of trying to reform the guardianship system as it applies primarily to older adults. It also applies to developmentally disabled people, but we both came into contact with it in full force as we began to notice what happened to older adults who were stuck in the system, destroyed by the system. Their families were crushed by the system. And I did a book about it in relation to my mother and also some of the journalists who were trying to help with the fixing of these mammoth problems, of which Diane is one. She had a wonderful series in the Albuquerque Journal back in 2015, 2016. It won awards. She won awards. It was a really great series. Unfortunately, now they've got it behind a paywall, so you can't see it unless you look at her website, where she has gotten permission to post it again. I think that she is best introduced by herself because she is a wonderful advocate, and she's been a wonderful advocate for other causes as well in the past. But this has been something that's consumed her efforts for a number of years now. She started around 2014, I believe, to start working on this, and it's taken quite a while, and perhaps even Britney Spears, to get other people to recognize what a huge problem it is. So I'd just like to introduce you, Diane, and take it away.
Thank you, Leonie, and thank you to everybody for asking me to be here. It's interesting. Well, first I'll start by saying people were talking about their events coming up. I will be back in my hometown of Albuquerque on September, I wrote it down, September 29th for a book event. The local public radio station is sponsoring it. It will be a panel discussion. I don't think I'm at liberty to say who exactly will be on that panel, but I think you'll find it very interesting. And it's at the Bonifacio Professional Development Center on Louisiana and Comanche, and it's September 29th, begins at 6 p.m. And with any luck, I might have some books there that I could sign for you. So again, thank you very much for having me. It's really an honor to speak to a group, like I say, back in my hometown. As you probably know, I write nonfiction. My whole career has been dedicated to facts, fact-based reporting. I've been in radio, television, newspaper. I have 4 books to my credit now. The 4th one we will be talking about tonight. And I have basically concentrated on crime and justice issues. I used to cover the White House and Capitol Hill, and I just couldn't take that anymore. So I decided to make crime and justice my genre. You know, when I first got to television, my first TV job was at WCBS in New York. I would hold a microphone and stand out in a snowstorm, and I would tell viewers to drive carefully. That's being a reporter. Over the years, I evolved. I honed my craft, and I became an investigative reporter. Instead of live television, it's up, it's down, it's gone, I spend weeks, months, years sometimes to develop a story for a long-form magazine article, for example, or for a book. And the best illustration of that is way back in 1993, I broke the story about the sexual abuse allegations against Michael Jackson, 1993. In 2003, I broke the story again that there was a second young boy who had come forward, 2003. I didn't write my book about it until 2005. And I don't know, I have a new camera and I don't think you can see it very well. But anyway, this is my book on Michael Jackson. It's called Be Careful Who You Love. So my point is, I don't work in a slapdash fashion. I take a long time to study what I'm interested in, and then I write the book. So flash forward to all these years, and I now have gotten a book, as Leonia said, about the guardianship system in America. I'm going to start my PowerPoint presentation. I hope you just hold on there. I think I'm doing that right. Yeah, there's the book. It's called We're Here to Help When Guardianship Goes Wrong. Brandeis University kindly said, yes, we have to have that book. And I was thrilled that they took me on, because this is the namesake, of course, of a former Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis. And his famous quote is, if we're going to have respect for the law, we have to have a law that's respectable. And in the case of guardianship and conservatorship, I don't think it is respectable. Let me begin, I guess, by telling you that to discuss this, I think I need to give you a little primer on what is guardianship. Now I'm going to try to go to my next. Help me out again. How do I go to my next slide? Rose, you were telling me?
Just hit your arrow down on the keyboard to the right.
Go down. No, it's not working.
No, it's on the bottom part of your keyboard over on the right. The right-hand arrow goes forward. The left-hand arrow goes back.
And it's on my keyboard, but it's not seeming to work.
Well, hit it twice.
Boy. So how do I
hit it twice?
Hit it twice. The down arrow. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. Hit it twice. That's the way to do it. So here's my quick primer on guardianship. Relatives, family members usually start the procedure. They go to a lawyer, and maybe it's squabbling siblings who say, you know, I think my mother needs this. So they go to a lawyer, and the siblings don't agree with that. But the lawyer will invariably say, I've got the solution for you. It's called guardianship. You can be the guardian. But when they get to court, they find out that the judge doesn't make them the guardian. Judges often appoint for-profit total strangers to take over the loved one's life. And they are immediately declared incapacitated wards of the court. And unbelievably, in the United States of America, these wards are stripped of their civil rights. And I mean stripped of all their rights. They cannot even hire a lawyer to fight against what could be an unwanted or unnecessary guardianship. They can't vote, they can't marry, they can't sign a contract, they can't decide where to live or which doctors to go and see. All of their life decisions are made by this guardian, this court-appointed guardian. There's little oversight of these appointees because the judges are too busy, or they're uncaring, or you know, they've appointed a friend and they just trust that friend to do the right thing. But when they don't, there's little recourse. Guardians are not licensed, except in 3 states. Just 3 states recently have decided maybe we should license these people. There are no federal laws governing guardianship. It's a state-by-state mishmash of different laws. Not one government entity is keeping track of the almost 2 million Americans who live under this system. It's not just Britney Spears, it's up to 2 million people. Now, why do I say up to? Because no one keeps track. We keep track of automobiles in this country and missing children, but nobody keeps track of how many people have been made wards of the court and stripped of their civil rights. Every year in this country, wards, estates, that being their money and their property, are confiscated by courts to the tune of $50 billion. $50 billion. Now, the average guardianship, I discovered, is about 6 years. So that's an available pot of money of $300 billion. Much of it under the control of total strangers to the ward. When caught red-handed doing scurrilous, terrible things with ward's money, with ward's property, and with the body of the ward themselves, there's very little punishment. I was stunned to find out how little is actually done to a guardian who has stolen up to hundreds of thousands of dollars from a ward. They get a slap on the wrist, their certification, if they even have a certification, is yanked, and maybe they're kicked out of the business. But very few of them go to prison. And I can't read the last thing here, but let's move on. This is the first case I ever heard about. He was a doctor, Jack Herman, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of his 8 children was my very best friend in high school. After school, we got an apartment together. I love this guy, prominent member of the community. My best friend died, but her sister called me in 2014 or 15 and told me the story of the court orders against her father. He had about $8 million. She thought maybe some of her siblings had been stealing some of that money. She was convinced to go to court and get a guardian for Dr. Jack, and it completely boomeranged on her. She was not appointed the guardian. A total stranger was. And when she complained, the guardian, as Leonie knows all too well, the guardian has such power that, I think it was a male guardian, completely banned my friend from going to see her father. Oh, sorry, you can't come anymore. I mean, there was security at the door to keep her out. So she wanted me to publicize this. And I said, let me look into this. Wow, never heard anything like this. Well, in the state of New Mexico, it's completely secret, or it was back then. I couldn't get court documents. I know how to dig and get court documents. I have private detectives I work with. They couldn't get any documents. I couldn't get one person in New Mexico, except my friend, to talk to me about how did this system work. So I had to tell her, I'm sorry, I believe what you're saying, but I can't prove it, so I can't write about it. I mean, I'm sorry. As I say, I work with a lot of private investigators across the country, and coincidentally, about 6 months later, one of them called me and said, you got to hear this story. It's about a woman named, oh, I'm sorry, I missed a slide. In the end, for Dr. Jack's daughter, she was duped into getting this guardianship. The case file was sealed. There was a gag order in place. She was threatened with jail if she talked openly about it, and she wouldn't go on the record with me. So again, I just couldn't do anything for her. It made me sad. Then this PI across the country in Maryland tells me about this woman, Elizabeth Betty Winstanley. Her husband of 72 years had died. She wanted to go and live with her 2 children in Maryland, but she had an older child in Pennsylvania who said, oh, no way. There was still a simmering childhood feud going on, and he filed for guardianship and kept his mother in a captive court situation. I have to tell you, I've never spoken to a woman as interesting and fascinating and intelligent as Betty Winstanley. She was not incapacitated in any way, shape, or form. And so then I started to remember the Herman story, and it was just a stroke of luck that Pennsylvania is not so secret. So I got to go to a court hearing for Betty, and I was kicked out halfway through when they realized who it was, but I found disturbing similarities between these 2 cases. Court appointees were benefiting from the situation, but not the words of the court. She wanted to move. They wouldn't let her. She died alone of COVID in the home that she had shared with her husband and the Masonic Temple Lodge, is assisted living place. And she didn't want to be there, but the state of Pennsylvania kept her there because she had about $1.9 million when all this started. When she died, she had a few thousands in the bank, and that was it. So what is a reporter to do to advance a story like this? I mean, most of it's secret. You get into a hearing, but then you get kicked out. So here's the recap. 2015, the Herman daughter, she was too scared to go on the record, but the less secrecy in Pennsylvania allowed me to get a glimpse into how it worked. And I began to write about Betty Winstanley in several of my syndicated columns. I I had a column at the time. It appeared in the Albuquerque Journal and many other newspapers across the country. And once I began to write about it, the floodgates opened. It was unbelievable. I started hearing from people nationwide saying, me too. It's happening to my brother with cerebral palsy. It's happening to my sister who had a stroke. And I realized I had a national issue that nobody was talking about. Another coincidence, I discovered a very brave family in New Mexico, the Darnell family. 4 children, 3 of them said, we don't care about the gag order. We're going to talk to you. And they went on the record with me. I got lots of court documents, or the ones that they had anyway. And other people who worked within the system in New Mexico, once I said, hey, I know what's going on, they began to talk to me too. I'd like to tell you who they were, but they were confidential sources. They were other families who had been affected and told me their stories, but they did not want to go on the record. They were not as brave as the Darnell family. I asked then the lawyers who work in the system, the guardians, the conservators, the elder care companies, anyone involved, to talk to me about it. Give me your side. Total crickets. Nobody would talk to me. Nobody wanted to go on the record. They all cited the gag order, that convenient gag order. Or most of them also discussed the HIPAA laws. Of course, you know, that guarantees a person's privacy on medical information. So, you know, okay, I get that, gag order and HIPAA. I kept a computer file on every single family that I talked to. And somebody asked me today, how many families are in your book? Or how many families have you talked to? I don't know. I lost count. It's thousands. Thousands of people over the last 8 years have told me their horror stories about this system. So I approached the Albuquerque Journal with the Darnell story, and their wonderful editor, who's since retired, Kent Walls, said, you know, I'm a little wary of this, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but the result was a 6-part series. And I never stopped adding stories into my arsenal, into my computer arsenal, because I always wanted it to be a book. And this was the series in the Albuquerque Journal, Spotlight on Blair Darnell. We not only told her story, but other stories without attribution for people who wanted to remain anonymous. And then we told people how it worked. I mean, how does a guardianship start? It's incredibly easy for a guardianship, for someone, anyone, to start a guardianship against another person. It can be an angry relative or a former business partner, a former lover, a neighbor, a hospital who wants you out of the bed because your insurance is running out, a nursing home. I have a case here in New York where I live now. A landlord wanted a woman, an 85-year-old woman, out of her rent-controlled apartment because they wanted to rent it for more money. That's a very sad story. Anyway, so we told people about the process and the players within the system, and the reaction was immediate. I got even more phone calls and emails from people saying, me too, please tell my story. The New Mexico Supreme Court back then, the chief, Daniels, he's since passed away, he set up a task force to study the problem and make recommendations, and lawmakers in New Mexico passed reform laws. And then the FBI moved in. Now, I wasn't credited with that, but it didn't take long for the FBI to move into New Mexico, and they arrested people, lots of people, at 2 different specific guardianship-related companies. The first one was this fella on the top, Desert State CEO. He stole $4 million from clients' wards. The other couple you may have read about, the Harrises, Ayundando, they stole $11 million from wards of the court. Their big, both of these people, their big mistake was they stole federal funds, Social Security, military pension money, and that allowed the FBI to get involved because, again, this is a state-run system and there are no federal laws regulating it. So I understand the New Mexico legislature is still considering more reform laws. I'll believe it when I see it. And frankly, to my mind, these reform laws are a Band-Aid on a big, fat, open wound because nothing is being done to make it not so easy to start a guardianship in the first place. The petitions that are filed are often replete with lies and exaggerations. That's all it takes is for someone to file a petition with the court and say, John Doe, Jane Doe, they can't take care of themselves. And here's why. And petition after petition after petition I looked at were not true. But the judges in these courts don't ask questions. They get these petitions from a member of the court, it's an officer of the court is presenting this petition. So they say, oh yeah, okay, rubber stamp. Often they don't even see the ward or hear from the ward. And all their liberties are taken away in one fell swoop. And it's almost impossible to get out. Let's move on. So I want to talk about some of the victim categories. As Leonie said in the beginning, I thought it was just elderly people who had worked hard all their lives, saved up some money, had a nice house. Betty Winstanley had $1.9 million. Dr. Jack Herman had $8 million. So that's who I thought the targets were. These poor, vulnerable, older people, maybe memory problems, Alzheimer's, dementia. That's not all it was, I found out. People of all ages with physical or intellectual disabilities, people who had just suffered a temporary brain injury or had symptoms from a stroke or a temporary mental illness episode. Young people who had inherited money were being targeted. Those who won settlements from workman's comp or a medical malpractice suit or car accidents. All these types of people, veterans with reliable pensions, were being targeted by predatory players within this guardianship system. Again, all they had to do was present a petition to the court and say, hey, look at the person, judge, this is what their story is. And boom, the person was in guardianship. And it's still happening today. And the most outrageous thing I discovered is the bottom line here. Women caught up in contentious divorce situations were being guardianized by their husbands. The divorce attorneys were telling the husbands, hey, she's not cooperating. Let's just guardianize her, and then she can't hire an attorney to fight back. Diabolical. But in the book, I spell out several of those cases. Here's the human toll. Again, thousands of people, thousands of families I've talked to. I just pulled a few of these screenshots here. I wish I had time to tell you about each and every one of these people. The young man on the top here, he's in a wheelchair, he has cerebral palsy, but that affects your motor skills, not your brain, not your intellect. He and this man in the middle here, this man is from New York, and this one is from Nevada, also has cerebral palsy. And when they reach the age of 18 and they're supposed to get their inheritance, they don't get it because the guardians won't let go. Each and every one of these people, I tell their story in the book. Some will make you weep, some will make you be really mad. This man up here in the corner, this is Walt Disney's grandson. He was erroneously labeled as having Down syndrome by the trustees of his estate. He didn't get the disbursements he was supposed to get for 30, 35, and his 40th birthday. And he's still fighting for his money, even though a court has said he doesn't have Down syndrome, but the trustees won't let go. And the judges allow it to happen. I could talk for hours about what judges have allowed. Here's some of the bad actors I found. Again, I could have filled up 5, 7, 12 of these pages with the bad actors. The top row are all guardians. all convicted of doing terrible things to their wards. The woman on the far left is from Nevada, April Parks. If anybody saw the movie I Care a Lot with Rosamund Pike, this is the character. It was her character was based upon. She was so awful that when one of her wards died, she would just cremate them and not tell the family. And she would not turn over the cremains. She kept them hidden in a storage unit. Somebody bought that storage unit, opened it up, and there were 27 urns of her wards. Again, I could tell you all the stories about these people. These three on the bottom were also, well, she hasn't been convicted yet, but almost. This is a married couple that were convicted. And these are just two of the judges that did such outrageous things, Nevada and California. They were taken off the guardianship bench. But of course, they weren't disciplined or fired. They were just sent to other parts of the courthouse. So how did I go from a newspaper to a book? I wanted it to be a book from the beginning. I went back to my publisher, Simon & Schuster, who did the Jackson book with me. They thought it was all about old people and they just weren't interested. I was counseled to write a long form piece to spark interest in a book. So that's what I did. I developed that New Mexico Darnell family story, and I went to editor Kent Waltz at the Albuquerque Journal. Now, he saw problems with it because I couldn't tell both sides of the story. I tried really hard. I went to New Mexico for a month. I lived at my cousin's house. I banged on doors. No one would talk to me, but I suggested to Kent that the secrecy could work to our benefit. I mean, we would report that there was no comment because of HIPAA or gag orders or whatever, but we should focus on the consequences of guardianship, abusive guardianship, the real human suffering that was happening. I should say some guardianships work out really well, especially if a loving family member is named as a guardian, but so many do not. That's what propelled me forward. So I did all that. I got the 6-part series. I won some awards for it, some big awards, and still no book deal. So then what was I going to do? I had just about given up. And then there was the case heard round the world, Britney Spears. I won't go into her whole case. Everybody knows her dad got her, they call it conservatorship in California. She spent 13 years, 9 months, 11 days, declared as incapacitated. Yet she was working day and night, earning multiple millions of dollars, giving money to, she was, I think at one point there were 13 lawyers on her case. And of course, the ward pays for everybody who's there to help them and protect them. In her case, I don't know how many multiple millions she lost, but a lot. She was finally released, one of the rare cases of someone getting a guardianship or conservatorship terminated, November 2021. So then publishers were interested all of a sudden. And I got Brandeis University Press, as I say, their Law and Society series. They thought this book would be just right for that. And I thought so too. So I'd like to get out of this PowerPoint now. I might have to, oh no, there we go, stop the share. And that's a little primer on what is guardianship and how do you cover something so secretive. You try to get the word out there and then somehow the victims affected find you. You know, Google is a wonderful thing. People all over the United States are still contacting me because they have Googled the word guardianship or conservatorship. They found my syndicated columns. They found the Albuquerque Journal series when it was still available on the Albuquerque Journal website. But I will tell you, my brand new website was supposed to already be up last week. It should be up next week, and I'll have the whole series there. I'll also have a page, a navigation bar called Guardianship Central. And for any family who, if you hear of someone going through this, direct them to that page, please. It's full of resources, associations that can help them, other books on the topic. Not as wide-ranging as my book, I must say, but other books and articles, the Albuquerque Journal series. I have a glossary of terms there because there's so many, when a family goes to court, they're faced with these phrases and people, and what's a guardian? What's a guardian ad litem? What's a conservator do? What's a court visitor? So I explain all that in a glossary. I have a frequently asked questions section and more. Some of my original columns on Betty Winstanley and Jack Herman and all the rest. So that's it for me. I hope I've been interesting enough that people have some questions for me, because I can sure hang around.
Yeah, actually, my experience is not quite as extreme as that with guardianship, but both my parents, and this is back in California, at the turn of the century, middle-class people, but they invested well, they owned property. Mother and father divorced years ago. I had to get the city, or actually the county of San Francisco's Adult Protective Services to get my mother into a conservatorship because my older sister and her husband were looting my mom. With my father, his second wife, even though she'd signed a prenup and all the rest of it, came after his estate. And there were a lot of irregularities, I'd say. When my father fell unconscious for the last time, he somehow managed to transfer $40,000 from one of his bank accounts into a joint account with his second wife. I could not get the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office to look at it because it was a civil and family matter. I couldn't get the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department to do anything except say, well, there's no proof he didn't do it. So I think the sad part of the experience is that we age into prey, and that there's very little in the legal system, any part of it that's supposed to be looking after older people, that is actually functional.
Or those with disabilities, too.
Yeah,
it's the most vulnerable among us that are the prey.
Yeah, and you know, I hope everybody here who has money to pass on to their heirs finds a really good bulletproof way of doing it.
Well, you know, I thank you for saying that, because it makes me want to say, Art, that in the book, I write about how easy it is to, a guardian will just go to the judge and say, oh, you know, I know there's a will that says the house should go to the daughter, but I need to sell it to pay their bills. And so the judge just allows the will, the trusts, the estate plans to be rendered moot. It's such a bizarre thing. So I know what you're talking about. And when families, and I describe case after case in the book, they call the police and they say, the guardian won't let me go visit my mother. She's all alone. What's going on? And the police and the district attorney's office and the sheriff, and they'll all tell you, well, it's a civil matter. We just do criminal things here. And it's, you know, the judge has ruled, and, you know, Art, none of them want to go up against a sitting judge. They're not going to go against a judge's order, which is another one of those catch-22 things in this system that, again, propelled me to keep digging. I just couldn't believe it happens in America. But I'll tell you, these cases occur in what's called equity court. So an equity court isn't like a criminal court or a civil court. There's no guarantee of due process. There's no trial. If witnesses are put on, they're usually witnesses that are buttressing the petition that says, hey, this person needs help. So they'll bring in a neighbor who says, oh yeah, I heard her screaming in the middle of the night. But there'll be no other side witnesses. So these equity courts have got to be changed. And that's a very long answer to your dilemma.
The courts have
that's why it happened.
But also, again, in my experience, the relationships between will trust and estate attorneys, banks, trust mills. You know the term.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
They're all motivated by money, you
Yeah,
see.
with my father's estate, he had everything set up well. He had all his money at Merrill Lynch. He had lawyers he trusted, all the rest of it.
Mhm.
Somehow it all got moved to other entities. The trust mill that wound up being nominated by a bank up in Northern California overpaid the taxes by 40 grand. And
They
then,
never got it back.
oh no,
Yeah.
the refund went to the trust mill. My sister and I never saw a cent of that money. And nobody's looking. Nobody seems to want to know about it.
Right, and when you as an aggrieved child goes to the court, adult child, goes to a judge to try to explain it, well, they don't want to hear from you. They'll tell you, you have to get a lawyer to talk to me, which costs you money. Anyway, Art, I want to give other people a chance to ask a question. I, at the risk of sounding like a huckster, I hope you buy my book because I think it will, at the very least, let you know that you're not alone. Happens all the time.
I'm
Unbelievable.
using it as a plot point in a novel.
There you go. Ooh, maybe that's my next project, a novel with guardianship at the center. I don't think so.
I'd like to go back to the secrecy portion of it, since that's
Mhm.
my big deal. And it's the reason why I wouldn't talk to you at the time, because I knew that I would be totally silenced and all the records would be sealed forever. I had what I knew was an opening because I was still my mother's only heir. And I would have legal standing after she passed to get the records open if I didn't mess it up before that happened. And so I was very, very careful, and everybody told me I was terribly boring because I wouldn't speak to anybody, wouldn't have lunch with anybody, wouldn't talk to anybody. I'm sorry, including you.
I remember that.
Yes,
Yes.
but I succeeded at the end in having 40,000 pages of documents released, which means all of those arguments that won are open for anyone else to use because they're not copyright. So anyone can use my attorney's arguments, anyone can use the transcripts of the hearings where the judge said to someone who was supposed to be an auditor, I don't want you to find that the guardian did anything wrong.
Oh,
You can issue a report and we'll pay you for the report, but you're not allowed to say they did anything wrong. You're allowed to make recommendations for improvement.
yeah. I mean, this is one of the most insidious things about this whole system to me. The judge appoints a guardian like that one Leone is talking about. And even when they know they're doing something wrong, the judge doesn't do anything about it because it would come back to them. They appointed a crooked or predatory person. They don't want to admit that. So they just sort of say quietly to the person, hey, come on, change that report or fix that audit. And it is, somebody called it a cottage industry of lawyers, guardians, conservators, judges, I wouldn't call it a cottage industry. I would call it an industry. I would call it organized crime in some cases, like Art just described to you. $40,000, another 40,000. This is organized crime, and why there hasn't been a successful RICO case brought, a racketeering case brought, I don't know. There was one down in Florida, the case of Oliver Bivens, which sort of went to that, but you're preaching to the choir, Leone.
Yeah.
That's secrecy.
It's
Just
very, very, very common, and it should not be common. It should not happen.
now that's a reform bill that should pass. No secrecy, open documents for the family anyway.
We
So,
theoretically have an open court system. It's one of the features of not having a court of the Star Chamber in this society, but we do. We have it in family court. And we also have it in elder care.
I
Same
think
thing.
it doesn't happen in America, but it happens all the time, every day. So, anyone else? Maybe just like a regular question, not about your own terrible case, although I see people here whose your stories are in my book. Rio Hamilton's mother, a beloved educator down in Las Cruces, who, well, I should let you read it in my book, or Rio can tell this story. I think also one of the Darnell, or maybe two of the Darnell folks are in. I can't see everybody who is in on my little screen here.
Diane?
There's
Yeah.
a question in the chat by Andrea Penner.
Oh, uh-huh.
How do the guardians get on the list from which judges choose?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know what you have to do to be a guardian? You have to be 18 and a high school graduate. Yeah. Now, some states do have restrictions. They have, you have to be certified. Well, what does that mean? It's take a course online and just say that you've looked at all the videos. Some of them, like I said, 3 states, Nevada, California, Alaska, do require that a license, that they be licensed, a guardian be licensed. But you can just be a guardian anytime you want. I mean, anybody can be a guardian. I found guardians who were convicted felons. I found a guardian in the state of Texas who was a mechanic, a car mechanic. And the elderly man, his customer, he had all these classic, beautiful cars. He worked on them, and the old man forgot to pay him to the tune of $20,000 or $30,000. And he went to a lawyer and said, "What should I do?" And the lawyer tells the mechanic, "Why don't you apply for guardianship against that old man? Then you can pay yourself." And that's what happened. A mechanic became a guardian. So, you know, I talked at the top about how much money is floating out there. There's this pool of about $300 million just sitting there. So is it any wonder that people with dollar signs in their eyes or crime on the mind are attracted to work in this system, guardians included? Elder healthcare workers who go into the house and steal. Anyway, I could go on, but how do you become a guardian? You just say, "Hey, I'm a guardian," in a lot of states.
Melanie also has a question on chat.
Oh, okay.
Diane, I was wondering, you mentioned, put the word out and you'll get a lot of responses. How do you get the word out?
Well, I was lucky enough to, Melanie, to have a syndicated column with Creators Syndicate. So my weekly crime and justice column was in newspapers across the country. Not a lot. I mean, it wasn't very lucrative for me, but I really enjoyed doing it. So they came to me through that. Then after the Journal article, the floodgates opened up. But how do you do it? Well, give me a topic and I'll give you some ideas. I mean, if you wanted to talk about nursing home abuses,
Prison system.
start getting to know people at nursing homes and they'll start talking to you. People love to talk about what's going wrong.
The prison system is what I'm actually referring to.
The what?
Prison system. PRISON.
Oh, prison.
Yes.
The prison system. Yes. Oh boy, that's a good one. There are guards that would love to talk to you, but there are inmates' families who would love to talk to you. And there's all sorts of forums online where this is the time of year where I get a lot of, always have for years, a lot of letters from family members saying, "My husband, brother, cousin, sister, whatever is in prison and it is so hot. There's no air conditioning. They're dropping in their cells. What can you do to help?" So if you put yourself out there on some of these forums, Reddit is, I don't really use Reddit, but Facebook, just look around for groups and chat places where people talk about your topic and get in there. Let them know what you want to do. I want to know how hard it is to be a prison guard, or I want to know what happens to prisoners in 120-degree heat. And you'll get responses. That you may have to wade through some kooky ones, but I bet you're smart enough a cookie to look through that.
I'm specifically referring to once they leave the prison system.
Mhm.
You know, you can spank a child and instantly hug them and say, it's okay, you won't do that again. In the prison system, you have a felon, whether or not he's really rightfully convicted, who doesn't just serve his time, but he serves it for the rest of his life.
Yes.
Because it's online, it's everywhere, anybody can look him up, and he is punished forever.
Yes. Yes.
And that kind of thing is, well, so it's not fair because we have an internet that allows for that. But I'm just wondering what, you know, how do you go about getting people who are experiencing those things to respond?
I have written several columns about exactly this. You serve your time, you get out of prison, now you're on parole. But the parole, God forbid were convicted of a sex offense, the parole is so restrictive that, you know, there's certain parts of the cities you can't go, you can't live near a school, you can't get a job where any children come in, you can't, it's just terrible what we do to people. You know, that old phrase, well, he served his time. Well, that's not the way it is. And you're right. How do you find those people who are still in prison but out? Again, there's a whole bunch of places online. I wish I had your email. I'd send you some links to these places. In fact, there's one right there in Albuquerque that I've written about. Oh, I wish I could think of her name right off the top of my head. But get my email, Melanie, and you and I'll talk.
Thank you.
Talk. I'll put you in touch.
Thank you.
That's it. No more questions, no more stories. Any other horror stories on guardianship?
I don't have a horror story, but I got a different sort of a question. What about, you know, you're talking about multimillionaires who have people that are, or just really rich people that have people snarfing their money away. What about, you know, those people that don't have anything, that are mentally, you know, challenged or something else, you know, and maybe all their family are dead or whatever? What happens to them? How do they, you know, how are they taken care of after whoever had them initially is gone?
That's such a good question. And the answer is the government. The government pays incredibly generous monthly disability checks to people who have no one, or even if they have someone, they still get a disability check every month. It can be as high as $10,000 a month. Now that figure is fluid, but it can be $10,000 a month. So a guardian is appointed to this person and they say, I can find a group home to put this kid in and it'll only cost $3,000 a month. And then they can start charging fees that are rarely ever audited for the remainder of that $10,000 for that month. And maybe they won't eat up the whole 10,000, but oh, they'll have a personal messenger take over a pair of pajamas for the kid, or they'll be on the phone with Social Security for 4 hours. And, you know, at $200 an hour, that's a lot of money. And then maybe they'll make a phone call about, I needed to make a dentist appointment for the person. And now that's more fees for them. So even people who just subsist on government disability payments, or veterans who are disabled, but they also have a veteran's pension, oh, they're prime targets. Now, they're not as lucrative as Walt Disney's grandson, Bradford Lund, you know, but, or Betty Winstanley, who only had $1.9 million, but money is money. For the criminally minded, the predators out there in this system, you know, $100 is great, $100. I'd also like to say, if we are a society, is this the society we want to be, where the most vulnerable among us are preyed upon and we don't do anything. I mean, I live outside New York City in the countryside along the Hudson River. I'm in a rural community. But when I go into the city, which is frequently, I see the streets are lined with mentally ill, drug addicts, and now immigrants. We've gotten 70,000 immigrants that came across the border. If we're really a society that cares about the most vulnerable, why don't those people get guardians? It's because they don't have any money and nobody cares about them. It's harsh, but that's the truth.
I have a question.
Yeah, Jennifer.
So years ago, when my children were under 18, I never wanted them to ever go to the foster system. Like if something happened to my husband and me, and I would rather they sit in a police station until my sister or somebody could get there. You know, I never wanted them to have any contact with the foster system. So now thinking about my parents or my spouse and me, is there anything that you as a citizen can do in terms of, you know, in your power of attorney, your different paperwork that you file? Is there anything that you can draw up that says you never want to have a guardianship or something like that to protect you or your loved ones?
Yes, yes. Again, a judge can nullify your power, your mom or dad's power of attorney, their will. They can just say, oh yeah, no, never mind. And they toss it right out, which is amazing to me. One part of the legal system will spend lots of careful time drawing up the power of attorney for you and the will and whatever. And the other part of the legal system just says, nope, nope. And the judge throws it out. So yes, in the book, in some of the final chapters, I talk about things that you can do to protect yourself, including videotape your parents. Everybody's got one of these, right? A phone. Just set it up and start talking and talk to them about what is your desire. Would you ever want to be in a guardianship? And I guarantee you, they'll probably say, no, no way. Get them on videotape, get their desires on a piece of paper, on tape, something. And be sure to date the day of your videotape, if that's what you choose to do, because I've seen people say, oh yeah, no, that was null and they were already declared incapacitated when that was filmed. It was just a moment in time. They're really not lucid. So, you know, hold up that day's paper or something that can denote what date the video is played. And yes, I mean, my husband and I have a will, and I made a specific request when we updated it to say, I do not want to be in guardianship. No stranger for-profit guardians, period. Now I'm an only child. I have an only child. So I don't think there's going to be, you know, any big fight over my little estate, but yes, there are steps that you can take to do that. And I really recommend it, because I don't see this system changing right away. I mean, I have great hope that voices will rise up and demand it. I hope that the federal government will finally step in and do something about it. There's always hearings and whatnot on Capitol Hill about it, but nothing really firm, nothing substantive has been done to change it. So yeah, if your parents are elderly or you have a person in your family living with disabilities, get that protection, get it notarized, get it witnessed, get a lawyer to help you. Even if it costs a couple of $100, it's worth it. That was a long answer to your question. I hope I answered it.
I'd like to go back to your slide where you showed the two entities where their people went to prison because of federal offenses. Those two entities, they were taking care of poor people at the behest of the state. They were not taking care of rich people. And I think people need to know that, because it was they consider it little trusts of $50,000 and under that resulted from malpractice claims or accident claims. You mentioned that. And the other one was all people who were getting pensions and VA payments. And that amounted to $11 million.
Yeah.
It mounts up they do it in quantity. It's like a factory operation.
You know, there's one guardian in Nevada that I pointed out to you, whose character was based on the movie. Her name's April Parks. They finally went back after she was convicted. By the way, she got up to 40 years in prison. And they looked at her fee sheets, her audit, you know, like where did all your word's money go? And there were days that she billed for like 47 hours in one day. There's only 24 hours in a day, but it went into the court and nobody ever looked at it. Did you file your annual report? Yeah, okay, that's good enough. And no one ever looked at these reports, added up the hours. That's how insidious it is. I'm sorry, somebody had a question? No? Elaine?
Yes, this is only remotely related perhaps, but my experience has been with the assisted living situation and the lockdown. And being locked out from family member for until his death. That was the only reason I was no longer locked out. and he didn't get the medical care and all that he should have had. So did you have any observations on the effects of the lockdown on and in relationship to your topic?
Yeah, I sure did, Elaine.
Are you going to look into this other issue? Because it's big.
Yeah, no,
There wasn't any help anywhere.
There were just heart-wrenching stories of people who the person was in guardianship and then they disappeared. I was like, what, wait a minute, they left their $5 million in the bank, and where did the guardian take them? And I'm thinking of a specific case, Dr. Lily White in Florida, and her family couldn't find her. Finally, a good soul who fights for reform in this got a couple of private investigators involved, and they found Lily White in about four counties over in an assisted living home, but her family still couldn't see her. Even when they found her, they were not allowed. Now, I tell the story in the book, they sneaked in, they found a way to see her, but then everything was quickly clamped down, and Lily White died of COVID all alone after having been in lockdown for 3 or 4 years. I mean, in that assisted living all by herself. No one ever came to visit her because the guardian didn't let them. You see, because if you allow in onlookers or loved ones, they're going to complain about what you're doing to this person. So the best way to do it is just ban all the visitors.
And they didn't even let the state ombudsman from the health department or the long-term care and aging department come in. So there was no oversight.
Yeah.
I mean, you alluded to it earlier when you said about training, and you said they only had to say that they had watched so many videos. And that's what I found also in the compliance on the assisted living during lockdown, because all they had to do was on their Zoom meetings say, oh yeah, we met all the regulations.
Yeah, I watched all those videos. Yeah, sure I did. Yeah. It's amazing what we allow to happen to our at-risk population. And especially then we got hit with COVID. And well, you may have heard here in New York, our former governor, who was forced to resign, did some really stupid things, and tens of thousands of elderly people died all alone, locked down in nursing homes. I feel your pain, Elaine.
And that was our situation. That's what happened to him.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Diane, Rosa has a question.
Okay, Rosa. Where's Rosa?
She put it in the chat, but you probably can't see the chat is the reason why I thought she might want to just do it verbally.
I could get back on sharing my screen. Oh, there's Rosa. Hello, good to talk to her. Rosa, we can't hear you.
Okay, hi, no, I had to unmute. So just, we're basically on the opposite side, is we're guardians of my father-in-law.
Mhm.
So trying to protect ourselves, how do we, like, we receipt and do every little tiny thing to make sure that no one comes back at us saying that we are doing anything incorrect, like all those horror stories. You know, we don't
Right.
want anybody to say that we're not doing a good job taking care of him. He's got dementia and been living with us. We took him out of a place where he wasn't being taken care of over a year ago and has been with us. But we don't want anybody to say those things, like he's not being well taken care of, being abused, being, so like we receipt, even down to if we buy him apples, you know what I mean? Every little detail, we have a stack, so people aren't saying we're taking his money, because we, you know, anytime we go to my mother-in-law asking for money to help support him, she fires up. So we have to constantly be explaining why we do what we do. So I don't want anybody ever to come back and say, well, you took advantage of that. And look at you guys, you're living wealthy and going to Hawaii and doing these things, when we obviously are not. But how do we protect ourselves? Like, and how do, you know, that
You're doing
we're on the
everything-
opposite end.
You're doing everything exactly right. And I'll tell you, isn't it ironic, Rosa, that the guardians, predatory guardians, and again, there are some good, compassionate, professional guardians out there. I really do believe that, but
Of
there are a lot who are not. And they will blame, they'll go to the court and they'll say that family, they're dysfunctional, they're greedy, they're, oh boy, they're doing terrible things. And the judge will believe their appointed guardian over the family member. Many, many, many times I've seen that happen. So you guys are doing exactly the right thing. Isn't it ironic that the guardians don't really have to show the audit and
Right.
straight, but the families have to. So boy, I applaud you. You're doing it exactly right. And I know it's probably a pain to have to save a receipt for apples or a
We do,
McDonald's.
and it's a lot of work, but
Yeah.
we do, just to make sure that no one comes back, or if they want to, anybody, family members, because family members get greedy, or anybody, and if anything were to happen to him along the way, or we do eventually have to put him in a home, or whatever it is, somebody comes back, we can go here.
Yeah.
You know, we
And
didn't,
especially you've got a mother-in-law who's a little contentious.
yes,
You may go to a lawyer and guess what the lawyer will say? You should go for guardianship. Let's get the guardianship transferred to you.
yes.
You know, it could happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope I'm not making a prediction here, but bravo, good to your family.
Thank you. Okay, just question. Thanks.
Good ask.
Okay, we have only, it's getting close to the end of the main part of the meeting. We can
Okay.
probably take one more, and Sue Leertz has had her hand up for quite a while.
Sue, I can't see you, Sue.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. Yes.
So, your book is available for pre-order.
Yes, and I
Mhm.
understand the people who pre-ordered it have already gotten it. I just got
Oh,
mine
Well,
yesterday.
what I wanted to ask was, is it going to be available in bookstores?
Yes.
Rather than getting it online?
Yes, and again, I'm going to be in Albuquerque on September 29th at the Bonifacio Auditorium, Professional Development Center at Louisiana and Comanche. And we're going to get a local independent bookstore to come. My publisher is going to send out a bunch of books, and I'll sign them if people want. But the books will be in bookstores September 19th.
Okay. Like Barnes and Noble, or just,
Yeah, in fact, it's on Barnes and Noble. You know what? You could probably go pre-order it and get it before September 19th because they're already shipping out. So
okay, very good. Thank you.
thank you, Sue, for the question.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us. It's a interesting, I mean, very interesting topic, a different direction for most of us who write in other genres, but things to consider both on a personal level as well as on a writing level. So
Right.
thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. And if you have any other questions about guardianship, ask Leonie.
There you go.